Thank you. All right, let's pray. God, creator and maintainer of the universe we live in, we acknowledge your rule. We also acknowledge that the universe we live in is an imperfect place in which corrupted power is prevalent. And we must make our way holding these two things as reality. So as we gather to refresh our hearts with the community of one another in your spirit, we ask you for comfort and grace, insight and energy, imagination and creativity to walk in our reality, lovingly caring for each other and the universe. Amen.
All righty. Good morning, everyone. Julia here.
Oh.
All righty. Please feel free to join me. Jesus began telling a parable to the dinner guests when he noticed how they'd been choosing the best places. He was saying to them, when you're invited to a wedding by somebody, don't take the best place.
Because somebody with higher status
than
than
you
you might have been invited. And then the one who invited you both will come and say to you, give up your place to this person.
Then you'll begin to be ashamed as you go to take the lowest place. Instead, when you're invited, go take the last place.
That way,
when
one who
one
invited you comes, they'll say to you, hey friend,
come on
up higher.
And
Then you'll be honored in front of all the people at the meal with you.
because all the people who lift themselves up are going to be humbled, and those that humble themselves are going to be lifted up.
And Jesus was saying
the
person that invited him, whenever you
Whenever
give a
you
lunch
give a
or a
lunch
dinner,
or a dinner,
don't invite your friends, your brothers and sisters, your relatives,
or
or your rich neighbors.
Because they'll invite you in return. Instead, when you have a party, invite poor people, people with disabilities, people that can't walk, blind people. Then you'll be blessed
Because they don't
because
have
they don't have a way to pay you back.
You'll be paid back
And you'll be paid back
in
the resurrection of the just. And now, on to Cleveland for announcements.
You there, Cleveland? Maybe not. Well. Hope everything's okay with Cleveland. He was in touch with me yesterday.
Well, today is Sunday, June 25th. I'm in taking Cleveland's place today. He just messaged me very recently. Welcome, everybody. Who you got in your circle? That's today's theme. All right. Every Wednesday, how can we tell which parts of the Bible were for an ancient audience and which parts can be for everyone? Come join us on Zoom at 7 p.m. and we can have that discussion. When you give, you feel better. It's true. You know what? That's what that whole little reading was just about. You know, when you give for just the sake of giving, you know what? There's a reward you get that can't be counted in numbers. All right, we're going to be coming together in person 10 a.m. on July 9th. Afterwards, we'll get together to eat at Tucker's Grove. And for any of you who were at Tucker's Grove last time, it was kind of pandemic, COVID, and it was our first real get together. What an amazing time we had. So please come join us. It's a beautiful spot, and it's always good to see one another. All right, today, communion. Hold on, there's a text on there. I can't read what it's saying.
That's
Do
me.
this in remembrance of me. I know that's you putting in the thing, but I
Sorry.
blocked it on the
Okay,
screen.
sorry.
Do this in remembrance of me. You can take whatever you have on hand, coffee, cookies, and we'll use that for communion today. All right, and today's quote, because thus says the Most High and the Exalted One who inhabits the eternities, and holy is his name Most High, and holy is his dwelling with the humble, and with the weary of spirit, to give life to the spirit of the humble, and to give life to the heart of the suffering ones. Isaiah 57:15.
Thank you, Clint. We before we go to the word for today, we have another song, and I want to dedicate this song to anybody who has dealt with disrespect, microaggressions, anything like that over the course of the week, and in particular, our own Chelsea Craybill, who I know is always, presenting as loving and cheerful, but I know that she hit a bump in the road this week, and I will say more about that later. But come on, everybody, let's just take in this song. Has been around a long time, and it was and is for people who have nowhere to go, but find their way here.
Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. My Lord, He calls me. He calls me by the thunder. A trumpet sounds within my soul. I ain't got long to stay here. Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away, steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here.
Green trees are bending, poor sinners stand trembling. The trumpet sounds within my soul. I ain't got long to stay here. Steal away, steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. My Lord, He calls me. He calls me by the thunder. The trumpet sounds within my soul. I ain't got long to stay here. I ain't got long to stay here.
I called her Chelsea Craybill, but she's no longer Chelsea Craybill. She's Chelsea Lesnar Buxton. So I'm convinced that people often found healing in the presence of Jesus. In the chapter that we just read, Luke 16, Jesus attends a dinner party hosted by a prominent figure in the community. And the chapter begins with Jesus noticing a man with what we would call edema. In old Bible translations, it's called dropsy. And Jesus heals him. It's the when and the where of this man's healing that's very meaningful. He's in the home of a wealthy man, and in those times, he might have been considered impure and ineligible to be at a public function. It's also on the Sabbath, a day that some religious leaders considered too sacred to work, and they had sometimes accused Jesus of working and violating the Sabbath by healing people. I believe that Jesus healed people, but I don't think he wanted to fix everyone. There are communities in our times, people in our times who will assert that Jesus wants everyone to get healed. What we read in Luke 14 is not an appeal to heal, but an appeal to love, to invite, to host, to connect. I think Jesus had higher priorities. And one of his priorities was dinner parties. He takes time here to explain how to be a guest and how to be a host. Dinner etiquette. He tells guests, make sure you are not jockeying for position and visibility. And he wants hosts to know whom to invite. And just so that we get this, I'll read a portion of that. Whenever you give, Jesus says, whenever you give a lunch or a dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives or rich neighbors, because they'll invite you in return. Instead, when you have a party, invite poor people, people with disabilities, people that can't walk, blind people. Then you'll be blessed because they don't have a way to pay you back, and you'll be paid back in the resurrection of the just. Now, clearly, Jesus does not want us to stop being kind to our friends and family or even rich people. But I think we shouldn't hesitate, if we need to make some people uncomfortable that they are not the only priority. See, Jesus wants us to be considerate toward people who need consideration most. So it might sound like I'm exaggerating when I suggest that Jesus sees kindness, this degree of kindness, as the ultimate answer to community, national, and global strife. So the solutions we're going to focus on in the next few minutes are just a starting point, starting blocks that we're all familiar with. And I don't question that some of you have gotten farther out of the blocks than, say, I have. But the world's under pressure, and we get a good idea of the pressure our world is under when we consider the environmental doomsday clock. And honestly, we just don't know how close we could be to a nuclear event. Because we're working with humans, and some humans can be highly unpredictable, unreasonable. Humans can be volatile. So this past week, I checked Nextdoor. Some of you are on the app, the social media app Nextdoor. And there was a post by our own Chelsea Lesnar Buxton. She wrote, just a quick word to the real estate agents in town. When you put up signs to direct people to open houses, make sure they aren't blocking any sidewalks, curb cuts, or auditory signals. My husband and I live on Richmond Drive, and for the past few days, a few apartments have been showing in our building. The agents have put up signs that block the sidewalk, the curb cuts, and the auditory signals around the intersection of State and Broadmoor. I am a person who is legally blind and relies on auditory signals to get around town safely. Plus, our friends use mobility devices and need to access the curb cuts. So I read this, and then I was really impressed by the community's supportive comments in response to Chelsea's post. But there were just a few people who wrote things like, just walk around the signs, and telling Chelsea, stop complaining. Can't we all just get along? Martin Luther King said, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. But folks, you know that even when most of us are on the same page, not everyone is interested in mutuality. And we can feel so powerless at times. Sometimes the pressure's so great, we just feel like running and hiding permanently. But what, if I may ask you, what if we could prevent wars and save the planet at the dinner table? This is what Jesus saw. It's often said that Jesus was one of those humans, one of those teachers who was ahead of his times, like the Buddha, like Martin Luther King and others. But maybe it's not that they were ahead of their time, but they were in their time. Most people don't recognize this moment of possibility because they're stuck on yesterday or tomorrow, all illusions. A few days ago, Caroline sent out this link about Reverend Dr. William Barber retiring from pastoring the church in Goldsboro, North Carolina, that he's led for years. In 1993, the year he was called to lead the church, he was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis. Though he didn't talk about the condition, which causes the vertebrae of the spine to fuse together, and it resulted in a hunched back and a halting gait, he spoke candidly of the depression and the near loss of faith that came with his diagnosis and the ways that it forced him to lean more heavily on God. And I quote him, "I had an officer in the Christian church, the national church, call me, and he said, 'Barber, you probably gonna need to figure out another thing to do besides pastoring because the church ain't gonna wanna cripple to be a pastor.'" Addressing his retirement from his church, Barber co-wrote this article with Greg Gonzalez, who's associate professor of epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health. And he wrote this for the Washington Post. The article calls our attention to a recent study by one of their colleagues. It shows that cumulative poverty over many years is the fourth leading cause of death in this country. Current poverty, just being poor right now, is seventh on that list, and it alone causes 10 times as many deaths as homicide, close to 5 times as many deaths as gun violence, and 2.5 times as many deaths as drug overdoses. Cumulative poverty that lingers year after year is associated with approximately 60% more deaths than current poverty, putting only heart disease and cancer and smoking-related deaths ahead of the number of Americans it kills. So everybody, let me ask, will we ever conquer the poverty problem? I mean, it was an issue long before Jesus's time, and it persists today, even in this wealthiest of countries. And in fact, no other wealthy country manufactures more poverty. What is the solution? Well, Jesus does not propose philanthropy. He does not suggest GoFundMe. He does not suggest voting for policies that could take pressure off of poor people. And don't get it twisted. All of those things are extremely important. But Jesus takes us to the heart of the solution. Lunch dates, dinner parties. We open our hearts to one another by opening our doors to one another. You might think it's such an inconvenience, but it's only an inconvenience if we think it is. And say that again. It's only an inconvenience if we think it is. My sister Beverly, who you often see on these Zooms, she has taken my mom into her home in her advanced stages of Alzheimer's, and we've seen her gently and tenderly take care of my mom with such patience. I'm pretty sure that you have demonstrated love for somebody who could do nothing for you in return. Because deep down, we know it takes a village. There are people, yourself included, Reverend Barber included, who live with hope for a more harmonious world, a world without agonizing alienation, false separation. Hatred and cruelty have been part of the human story for so long. How can we have hope? How do we not collapse under the heaviness of pessimism? How can it be that anybody still has hope? It can be because we exchange divinity when we come together, when we eat together. This is what Jesus had in mind when he told us to have communion, not as mere ceremony, but as a meal for the rich and poor to come together. It's not the only solution, but it's a good starting place for decolonization. Our lunch times and our dinner parties are divine. They are the settings for miracles. They are divine because when we eat together, we do what families do. There's something about a family eating together. You know what? I love having a meal with Diane. The number of meals we've had together, it's countless. Whether here at the house or at a restaurant. When we eat together, we may even, some of us, find ourselves violating the idealized pseudo-sanctity elements of family. Maybe we have to create some family conflict in the short term because we choose inclusion by inviting people who are not related and can't pay us back. In Jesus's time, meals were the way to invite people into your home, but let me suggest more ways that are available now. Bring people's books, bring their movies, bring their stories into your home. It's at least a starting point. If you want to meet poor folks, disabled folks, queer folks into your home, you can start by not changing the channel when they show up on your screen. You can start by not scrolling past their uncomfortable social media posts. There are more ways that we can sit at the same table. We can join their organizations. We can go to their events. We can have a brilliant resource in the people that we have with us. We have such a resource in Jacob, Chelsea's husband, who hosts seminars to help us to know how to live with people with disabilities. And Jacob's seminars are often online, so you can bring them into your home. There are other things that we can do. You could join the NAACP or CAUSE, which stands for Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy. You could join Pacific Pride. You could support PFLAG, originally Parents of Lesbians and Gays. But mostly, we can invite people over. We have people on this Zoom who wouldn't mind joining someone else for a meal. If we don't obsess over healing or fixing people or solving people, we might better see our disabled sister, our transgender brother at the table. And we won't bother them if they don't want to be bothered about getting fixed. They just need to be seen. And this is how we all find our healing. Not a day goes by that I don't hug Diane and tell her, "You're good for my hormones." I think that we were born this way. We are all here to love each other, to even hug each other and feel it at a cellular level. You, just looking at you on screen, you give me good feelings. Because it really does take a village. And how about this? What if the community of wealthy nations invited poor nations to the table? And yeah, you're justified if you're telling me, dream on. But look, even if nations choose not to welcome everyone, that doesn't stop us from eating together. You may have seen in last week's news, there was a terrible tragedy at sea. Rescue efforts came up far too short and too little too late. Off the coast of Greece, more than 300 Pakistani nationals were killed in the sinking of an overcrowded fishing trawler. The latest tragedy to expose the refugee crisis confronting the European Union as tens of thousands seek sanctuary from war, persecution, and poverty. So guess who's not coming to dinner? Lisa, help us process all of this.
There was, as always, there's so much. That whole idea of life being interrelated, that goes back, Jesus tried to explain that, I feel. That poem, that no man is an island, entire of self. Mm. The fact that what you do affects me. And I think a lot of people use the excuse of, oh, well, you know what, you went through this so that you could grow. And the whole idea of, even though that you did this for evil, you know what, oh, but look how you've grown through it. That's a cop-out, because people use that excuse to justify them being mean to each other, or not opening their home to you, or not being welcoming. Huh?
Being indifferent.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that reminded me of something I've been thinking, hashing out, that greed is mental illness. And I think Jesus pointed that out too, because it's the main cause, it's the main mental illness, and it causes others to respond differently. And then we claim that the other people responding to the greed are mentally ill, when that's not it. Greed is the mental illness.
Wow.
And so that's one thing I've been hashing through. But I don't want to take the whole thing, because there was, oh, great. Julia and Team Julia has their hand raised, so I'm going to get you guys go.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much, Pastor Moore. I had a thought when you asked the question, what is the solution to poverty? What is the answer there? And then, Lisa, what you just said about greed. So we were watching something the other day about a documentary about energy, about how Tesla had, I guess, invented or figured out that you can grab energy like out of thin air, and he wanted to make that free. He wanted to make that technology free. And first of all, while he was alive trying to do this, the powers that be, AKA the greedy people who are in charge of fossil fuels, right? they kind of ruined his reputation. And so he passed away and never got to, never got to realize this. And the documentary was talking about, imagine that it should be free. It's knowledge, you know what I'm saying? So let's say it becomes free. And let's say that the only reason it's not free is because the people who are so greedy, who have so much power, they have the power to silence other people or to make it seem like the people who are trying to speak up are the ones who are sick and crazy. And it's the other way around. It's the other way around. And it's like, you just need enough people talking about it, enough people to say, no, this should be free, and then what kind of a solution, what kind of a snowball effect does that have? Because that free energy will provide unlimited resources, like the resources to clean water that people, that countries can't, they can't have access to because they don't have access to the free energy, so it's like a snowball positive effect that it's like, I felt hopeful. I felt like, if enough of our younger generation get their head wrapped around that you can make this stuff free and accessible, there's hope that can, it can do something beyond that greed, so that it tips the balance, the scale.
You know what, Julia, what you said and what Lisa was saying just really brings in relief the reality that, I mean, there is a projection that the people that Jesus tells us to invite, there's something wrong with those people, right? That there's something wrong with them. And Jesus is so affirming that, no, it's not that something is just wrong with them. And he does tell them how to behave, when they come to the dinner party. So maybe they don't have experience, so they might do some things wrong, but we all need to grow together.
I liked the we open our hearts to one another as we open our doors to one another, and I think that's true too, in that whole idea of, if you have something, why aren't you sharing it? Why aren't you sharing it? So many people have room in their homes, and so many people are homeless. And it's like those two problems, they're the answer for each other. If people wouldn't be greedy and hoarding, this is mine, the whole idea of this is mine, when it's like, well, nothing's mine. So if I have something that can help you, why don't I use it? Why don't I use it to help you?
It's an inconvenience if we think it's an inconvenience.
Right, because we've convinced ourselves that it's an inconvenience. Oh, I'm going to need this. Oh, I'm going to need this for my family. Well, who is your family? Who is your neighbor? Who is your brother? The person standing next to you that needs the thing. And instead of somebody across the town that, oh, I want to see this person that I have blood related, so I'm going to not let this space be used for somebody who needs it because they might want to come across, fly over and visit me, and I want to leave that opened. Yeah. When you have somebody who needs that, that whole idea.
And I don't know if Jacob has the facility to do the hand raise thing, but he's been unmuted. He's been unmuted for a minute.
Yes. So we make it through and the great message today, Pastor. I just wanted to point out Surfing Uses touch on, which is people with disabilities often have the capacity to support other people, so it's not just one restrict. During the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about mutual aid, and the people I knew with disabilities were getting frustrated because none of the mutual aid groups
Yeah.
wanted us to provide the aid. They wanted to give us the aid, and my mom, who stayed in her house for most of the pandemic, also was getting a bit tired of people asking what she needed and no one asking how she could help
Mhm.
people. And as me who isn't good with my hands, I often wonder what do I have to give friends and family who give me so much. Just I feel like I ask, I get way more than people ask of me, and that's a really uncomfortable position because a lot of us are like always worried that someone will get sick of helping us, and we never know when the day someone will get fed up with helping us comes. Thank
Yes, 100%, Jacob. You are right, and I did think about that, and kind of glossed over it because you know that little segment of scripture from Luke 14, that you know where we see the words of Jesus, are they're within a historical and cultural context where people with disabilities would not have been seen as even eligible to function in in mainstream society for more than just the reasons of disabilities, but because they were viewed as being just ineligible, impure. And so yes, so I'm glad that you did call that out. Thank you for that.
Diane Fox and Joaquin both have their hands up, and I don't know who wants to go first. Who?
Joaquin had his hand up first, I can say that much.
No, you go first, Dan, please.
Well, mine is kind of an organizing question here. But when someone was talking about the greed of the oil industry, of the fossil fuel industry, I thought maybe people in the Santa Barbara area would like to know that the 29th, whenever that 29th is, Thursday or Friday, Thursday, I think. Thursday. Anyway, at noon at West Beach, between the pier and the harbor, there are people coming together because right now, critically in the Sacramento legislature, there's a bill to divest of fossil fuels, and people are coming together to say, yes, let's do it. Let's support that. So pardon me for this political interlude here, but I thought
Yes.
some people might like to know.
Thank you for that, Diane. Yes, that is Thursday. And if somebody does have a window, please feel free to do that. That's the day the NAACP are hosting the athletes, the incoming athletes to City College, and also Ed's and Mary's wedding reception. I'm going to try to see if I can get to everything. I don't know, but Joaquin.
I was just going to say the way that Lisa had like I guess I just see the easiest way is sharing information, right? And just the way Diane did right now. Like, we need like a message board for, I can't remember where, and I just saw a message board and I was like, wow, this is empty. But there's so much going on. There's so much that we can just share with each other of different things that are happening. And like, you never know who needs to read whatever message is right there. And it's goofy because you see like those social media posts sometimes that's like, oh yeah, just put on a message board like you are loved, or, but it's true, you know? You don't have to be talking right with the person right in the moment to tell them that. I don't know. It was just a thought.
No, I like that. Roy and Cheryl have their hands up.
With me. As David was talking, I remembered a book that I reviewed what looks like 11 years ago. Keeping the Feast by Milton Brasher Cunningham. And it's a kind of a memoir of a thing that he made a practice. Once a week, they had a communal meal at their home, and everyone they knew was invited. He never says it, but I assume they must have asked people to let him know so he knew how much food to prepare. And there's recipes in the book. It's just fun. But in the foreword, there was a piece that jumped out, and I thought I'd share that. Always. You need to cook for people you don't know, pray for people you don't like, and eat with whoever shows up. Of course, it's not convenient. Preparing and eating meals with other human beings is frustratingly messy and slow, whether you do it at home, in a restaurant, or at church. The meal won't always taste the way you expected. And then skipping forward a little bit, listen to the word according to Milton Brasher Cunningham. Don't eat alone.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like eating together is so intimate that it could be threatening. Wow.
Funny. I eat alone a lot just because of my job. And it's like, I would rather not, but I've gotten to the point where I have to be able to. So I love that. That's brilliant. It's funny, Caroline put in the chat, we need to function as local newspapers for each other. And I read it wrong. The first thing I read, I thought she said we need to function as local first responders for each other. And I'm like, that's true. And I'm like, oh, I read it wrong, but both are right. My brain.
Emotional first responders, because guess what? We have better wisdom on how to do that than other first responders. You know what? We have a personal relationship with one another. You know what? So we're going to respond with love.
Right.
Amen.
Did you want to expound on that, Caroline? On your newspaper?
Oh, no, I'm just sort of a big believer in supporting local news, because otherwise, bad things go unreported, scandals go uncovered. And so subscribe to your local newspaper if you don't already. I know they all kind of suck now, but subscribe to it. Just keep it alive a little bit longer.
And start writing for it if it's bad.
Write letters. I write letters to the newspapers once a week.
Way to do it. Were you going to say something else, Clint?
Yes, I have one other thing. So the local newspaper idea is amazing. Local friendship idea is even better amazing. Like, when you say we are our local newspaper, because we have no interest that can be blocked. For instance, Santa Barbara News Press, whatever newspaper, their editorials are going to be edited based upon opinion, and guess who's putting the money into them? The news agencies. Pick a station at night that you watch news on. You're going to be given it through the filter of whoever the sponsors are. So filter your news through one another that you trust. And if you get that, the news you get is going to be more legit. I do my best to find sources that have nothing to do with anything on a TV, but I still like to be educated. And so it's hard. It's really difficult to find out the news because you're going to have to watch a bunch of different sources and pull from that what the truth of it is. And then sometimes if you're like me and do psychological analysis on it, you realize what the other agendas may be. When we have 10 articles about a submersible sub that had 5 billionaires on it, and you know what? One about 300 refugees. That tells you where they want the source of the information you get to be.
Yeah. Priorities. Their priorities are definitely skewed. And we have to fix that just by, our voices. So.
We're going to go ahead and let Kenichi come and lead us in communion together. And as he does that, I have a favor to ask of you, and that is when you get a moment, if you would, here we're on the same page essentially. I mean, we find strength in one another, and so I know that I'm preaching to the choir for the most part. But there are people, especially in red states, who don't get anything like us, all right? Even people in our state, but especially in red states. And I really want to expand the audience for my YouTube show and podcast. So even if you don't want to listen to it because you get enough of me, well, it's really not about me because I'm interviewing guests. So, I mean, fascinating guests. We have lined up some amazing people for the rest of the year, including Desmond Tutu's daughter, Fo Tutu, and David Hayward, the naked pastor, the cartoonist, and others. But anyway, but I need to get the algorithm bumped, right? So even if you don't watch it or listen to it, if you click on it and let it run while you're, doing whatever you're doing, washing dishes or something, then, it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Haiti, which is a smaller Black-owned podcast platform, and a couple of more places that I'm not remembering right now. But do me a solid so that I can do other folks a solid. All right, Kenichi, please.
Okay, if I may just chime in, Sairi was just sharing with me another view of, like Japanese, Koreans, especially in the rural areas where communal activities happen spontaneously, whether it's meals, whether it's assisting one another because somebody passed away, or making kimchi together, and that nobody is saying let's do this and getting the word up. It's just that it moves. Now again, this is happening more in the rural, not in the urban. And then another complex part of this is that some become overwhelmed by this kind of expectation that is placed on their lives, and those who begin to experience that will often leave that context, come out to the urban, or even escape the place like United States so that they can be left alone. And so it's just, I think, and then I also thought about, I know that all of us here, we have different personalities and different ways that we move. And some of us are much more gregarious than others. Some of us are more introverts than extroverts. And so there's a lot of things that are involved. But nevertheless, I think this is a good, as we come to the Lord's table, I think this is a good reminder for us how Jesus, the Christ, continually offers insights and considerations as to what it means to be human, and ways to address universal human need of being seen, being heard. And Pastor David, you mentioned one thing which I'm going to use right now. As we come to the Lord's table, let it not just be just another routine motion that we'll go through every Sunday, but allow it to be something of a reminder for us that no matter where we are at, socioeconomically or culturally or contextually, or wherever our whatever our persuasion politically might be, that we are connected through the broken body of Christ and the shed blood of Christ. And that supersedes everything. And that may we always be reminded of that we are first and foremost human beings, one human race connected by the blood and the body of Jesus. So with that, let's break the bread. This is the body of Christ broken for us. Let's partake. And in the blood of Christ, which was shed for us, let's partake. Amen.